All right. Guitarist Jonathan Kreisberg joins the program to share some advice for fellow six stringers, including one thing that guitar players can do to improve their jazz playing right now. He'll also be playing some tunes for us, plus new music in the 5 spot. I'm Brian Zimmerman. This is the Jazziz Happy Hour. All right. And once again, before we get into today's programming, just wanted to let you know about an album from ECM that I think you should definitely check out. This one is John Balk's Discourses. Balk's unique solo work kind of blurs distinctions between composition and improvisation and even sound design. He's got acoustic piano on this album, but integrated into the sound are these layered soundscapes of processed material. So sounds he kind of recorded out in the field and then refracted through his own electronic distortion. The album is really beautiful and all about this kind of conversation between processed sound and acoustic sound. Discourses was recorded at Lugano's Auditorio Stelio Molo in December of 2019 and was produced by ECM founder Manfred Eicher. For more information, you can check out the album, listen to some of the tracks, visit ecmrecords.com. Well, let me also remind you that our summer 2020 issue is now available, and it is all about fusion. You can see I've got it right here, Chicoria on the cover there. And this one is going out to mailboxes right now, as in right this second. Cover stories on Chicoria. We also talked to some young fusion players, go into an essential fusion discography. It's really cool. If you want to get a jump on it, all the content that is available in the print issue is on our website as web articles. You will need a digital subscription to read them. But the good news is if you subscribe right now, and I mean right now, you'll unlock digital access and you will be enrolled to receive the second mailing of this summer 2020 Fusion issue. So do so now. We're offering a special subscription rate for happy hour viewers for just 99 cents per month for 3 months. You'll get all this unlimited digital access, again, plus that complimentary print issue. So do it now. There's never been a better time to subscribe. All right, it is Wednesday, May 27th. Good afternoon to you. Dee Dee Bridgewater, the great vocalist, was born on this day. So happy birthday, Dee Dee. We also toast to Quincy Jones's album, Birth of the Band. Remember that album with that really smoking opening track and the really hip version of Moaning? That album was recorded on this day in 1959. So here's also to swinging big band music of the 1950s. If you are a guitar player or a jazz guitar enthusiast, you will dig today's show. Our guest is Jonathan Kreisberg. Not only is he a fantastic leader in his own right, his most recent album, Capturing Spirits, is remarkable, but he's also played with some real giants of jazz, including Dr. Lonnie Smith and the late Lee Konitz. He's going to be playing a bit for us and giving us some advice on stepping up our jazz game and just talking about his star-studded career. We've also got some new music in this 5 spot that I want to talk about. So yeah, without further ado, let's go ahead and welcome today's very special guest, John Kreisberg. John, you there, man?
Yeah, how you doing?
Good, man. How you doing?
Good. It's a different existence.
Exactly.
These days.
Good is a relative term these days. We're all just kind of hanging in there. But you've been keeping busy, playing, teaching. What's going on?
Yeah, I always feel guilty to say it, but I've actually been really making the best of it. I've been despite all the horrible things that are happening as a result of this thing, I'm just trying to make the best of it. I've been, teaching much more than I ever have before, and I've actually been really enjoying it. There's certain advantages to the online teaching. So I'm doing everything from master classes at universities as well as organizations in a lot of other countries, and also teaching private lessons. So that's been great. I've been exercising, which
you look good,
the last
man.
5 years I was on the road and I just didn't have time, so yeah.
Awesome, man. You are one of the most visible figures in terms of education on the jazz guitar these days. I know your backstory. You were born in New York, but you grew up in our neck of the woods in Miami. You went to the University of Miami. I'm just kind of curious about your own teachers, man, who kind of schooled you along the way and brought you to where you are today.
Well, so I was really lucky. When I was young, I had some great teachers that were teaching general kind of like theory and rock and blues and stuff like that. And then I got exposed to classical through a couple of friends that were players. And I kind of did that on my own without teachers for a little bit. And then when I was a senior, I went to this New World School of the Arts. I had been playing at a public school, and it's crazy because I think it's even worse now in the public schools. And back then I was being taught by a classical bass player, and I was kind of helping them figure out the fingerings as the student, which was weird. So my friend said, man, you got to go get out of here and go to this art school where I'm going now. So I went there, and I was lucky at the time. There was a teacher named J.B. Dias who,
Sure.
you know, now works with the Herbie Hancock Institute, and he's just really, really known for his methodical, you know, thorough way of taking young beginners in jazz and giving them some direction. A lot of great players came out of that system, you know, and that was great for me. And he really got me into the idea of studying bebop and learning standards. And through that, I really prepared a lot to go to University of Miami, where I studied with Randall Dallahan, who was another great teacher. You know,
cool, man.
I had a lot of other great teachers along the way as well.
Well, and I know, you know, some of the best teachers in jazz are the teachers on the bandstand. I mentioned up front you played with Dr. Lonnie Smith.
Sure.
He lives down here, at least part-time. Yeah. Was it down here that you first hooked up with him?
No, that's what's funny is, like, you know, at that time, Lonnie was kind of laying low. You know, he was playing at a place called O'Hara's, playing piano half the time, I think, you know, and I had just started checking out George Benson.
Okay.
And I didn't really put it together that was the same guy.
Right.
You know?
It's crazy. You go back and listen to these old and we're talking Dr. Lonnie Smith, amazing organ player. His early albums featured George Benson just ripping, shredding, you know, straight ahead jazz bop stuff.
George is a monster. He's one of the greats, you know.
Yeah. But anyways, go ahead, man. So how'd you link up with
well, Lonnie, so it was once I moved to New York, I put it together and I said, oh, that's crazy. And I kind of kicked myself for not, you know, pursuing him more when I was down there. And then an agent hooked me up with a gig with Lonnie.
Nice.
And the first time I played with him, it was like trial by fire. You know, it's like I was playing, the amp was, the speaker was blown on the amp. It was in a major jazz festival. And he basically counted off giant steps like here and then left me alone to play solo guitar in the middle of the tune. Like, it was crazy.
Wow, man. Put you through the ringer. Was it an organ trio stuff? I mean, organ.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
Oh, I love that, dude. I imagine the intensity for setting like that must be pretty high.
Oh, it's great. I mean, and what happened was over the years, I kind of like, you know, found my own thing with him. And I think, you know, we discovered some interesting zones. And I don't know if anything, you know, at that point I was pretty formed as a musician, you know, but I can say that it definitely confirmed certain things, which was kind of like that. What I really loved was kind of, you know, knowing the tradition and knowing bebop and the idea of how to make good lines and studying standards, but then keeping myself kind of open-minded to many other things that I like in other music, you know, and somehow combining those in a way with integrity, you know,
it's what you do, man. It's what you've been doing since early 2000s on all your discs, man. Well,
thanks.
Hey,
yeah, Lonnie, you know, Lonnie does it in a different way than me. Yeah. We actually have a very similar perspective about music and life, you know.
Right on, man. Beautiful. Well, you've got your axe, and I'm sure people are eager to hear you play, man. Would you mind doing a tune for us?
All right. Yeah. Let's see what's happening.
Right on. Nice, John.
I hope I don't regret this, but I'm going to try a tune of mine called Shadowless.
I know we won't regret it, man. We're in for a treat.
How's the level there? Is maybe like this. It's good?
Beautiful. Yeah, man. Beautiful, beautiful, gorgeous stuff. Shadowless was, of course, the name also from your album from 2011.
Yeah. That was when we did in a duo format on that album. So doing it solo is tricky.
No, dude,
Looking
I
for where
loved
the
it.
chords are.
No, it was awesome, man. And you mentioned this strong, songbook bebop influence, but people listening to you can obviously hear some other stuff, just between your technique and your tone. And I'm curious kind of what your musical background was like when you were learning guitar. Did you come to it from, rock, popular music side or through jazz?
Yeah. As far as learning guitar, you mean
Yeah.
in general?
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I was, when I was young, I heard a lot of jazz growing up. My dad had a great jazz record collection. And I heard My Favorite Things a lot. So that one I know had a really strong influence on me.
Nice.
Kind of Blue, Roundabout Midnight, Take Five. A lot of albums that actually I can kind of see why I kind of went certain ways with my harmony and my rhythm later in life.
Right. Okay.
But the reason that most kids picked up guitar at that age was, Eddie Van Halen, So I heard Eruption and I thought it was the most beautiful thing. I still think it's one of the most beautiful things I've ever heard. It's amazing that someone with can make such beauty out of such kind of a chaotic sound, and I still kind of am drawn to that. What was funny is I learned years later is that Eddie was kind of mimicking Alan Holdsworth, who's of course the great fusion legend we lost a couple of years ago.
Yeah.
And I contend that Alan's a great jazz musician, even though he's not in that kind of aesthetic.
Right.
Thinking is very similar to Coltrane's,
Right.
So
right.
It's just like, like they say, talking about music is like tap dancing about architecture. It doesn't always.
You can't really do it justice. Yeah.
Yeah. And I mean, even the idea of labels in music,
Right.
To me, there's more similarities between Train and Holdsworth than there are between a lot of people that people would consider there's more similarities to. So,
no, I get it, man. It's like I think Ben Ratliff calls it listening vertically, instead of horizontally across genre. You can hear similarities, between John Coltrane and Alan Holdsworth and, probably some modern day rapper or something like that. And, just in the way that their style and the way they approach their art.
You have to listen to different things. You can't listen to the obvious signposts. Sometimes there's other, I contend that you know, a lot of people would argue with me, but the Coltrane Quartet was the first fusion band. You know,
Okay.
they were much earlier than the stuff that they call the first fusion stuff.
Yeah.
Whereas actually the aesthetic to me is more fusion than some of the things with synthesizers and stuff. I mean, the idea of just expanding the music and playing, you know, with this energy.
Yeah.
You know, and that's really comes from that group, you know.
Cool, man. Cool, man. Well, I know in our audience, we have a lot of guitar players. And just like you mentioned, I'm sure a lot of them are coming to jazz kind of through Van Halen and beforehand, you know, the Beatles or some of the blues, you know, musicians. In your own teaching, you know, when you get people who are new to jazz, you know, who kind of know how to play the guitar, they're into the rock stuff, but want to make a greater stride toward jazz, what are the first kind of things you have to retool in their brain?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard, it's tough because some of that stuff, if you're talking about going back that far, it's a little harder for me to teach because it's so long ago, you know. And I can say that, you know, I always was destined to play jazz and to improvise. You know, even when I was playing, you know, I felt horribly nervous when I was playing classical music. There's this thing classical players talk about. They say, well, you know, you practice it so much that your hands flow and you kind of watch yourself play the piece. That's terrifying. For me, that's completely terrifying. And I experienced that. I learned Bach and stuff to the point where it was, okay, it's just happening. Wow. And I was on stage and I looked up and there's people and my hands are moving. And I said, what the hell is going on? You know? Whereas for me, even playing my tune, when I'm playing the head, I'm a little in myself, but when I start improvising, I can kind of zone out, you know, and that was something I always did. So even playing, you know, rock music, I was kind of improvising a lot, you know. That's why, you know, my headspace is more coming out of like, you know, classic rock had more elements of that than modern rock, you know, improvising, you know. So for me, it was just culturally, that's what was happening at the time in Miami, you know, being a young white kid, you know, you were playing rock, you know, and even if you loved and studied other music, that just kind of worked out at the time, you know.
Right.
So, yeah, I mean, for me, it wasn't necessarily like, oh, I play rock, now I'm going to play jazz. It was always the same way of thinking, you know, studying the theory, understanding what it means to play a good line, transcribing and breaking things down. Those same things apply, you know. No matter what you're doing.
Totally. Transcribing, obviously, one of the most important things you can do to learn the art of improvisation.
It's a language.
It's a language. Yeah.
A lot of young musicians are in denial of that fact. They think, you know, jazz is learning a bunch of theory and then being creative with it. But there's three very necessary ingredients, right? Well, I would even argue that they're not all as necessary as others. The language is the most necessary, you know. There's great players out there that play just with language, you know.
Totally.
Chet Baker, Lonnie Smith, you know, these guys, they play with language and they're playful with it, but they're not always thinking. In fact, I'll see Lonnie playing some changes with his left hand, playing something with his right hand that just sounds great, but has nothing to do with the left hand. It's amazing, you know?
Right.
And that's really cool. You know, that's using the language that's so strong that it kind of overrides harmony and theory and stuff like that. So, you know, that's important, the most important. Theory is there to help you maybe unlock things. And for me, it always has been there as an interesting way to unlock the music and find my own voice, you know, combining that with the language.
Yeah.
And the creativity, which is, of course, very hard to teach. And there's great players out there playing language and theory and sounding really good. I mean, really good. Like, you know, the creativity and the forging one's own voice is something that's very rare and
the X factor,
very rare with the other two things intact.
Right.
Because I have students that are very creative, but they don't learn the language, and it just kind of sounds like someone being creative with theory or something, you know. So it's like, you know, you need really I mean, I would argue that all my favorite players have all three of those in a way, with some exceptions that don't have as much of the theory.
Right. So if you get a student that says, okay, I get the 3-part model, who should I be listening to? Which albums do you hand them?
Wow.
These cats have it all.
I mean, good examples of that, you know, for me, one of my major records growing up was Coltrane Sound. You know, that's a great album that really puts together those things in a really unique way. You know, Coltrane obviously being a perfect example of the fusion of those three things.
Right.
Maybe even the best example of that, you know. Yeah, I'd say, well, they're all the great players. So is Keith Jarrett. So is Charlie Parker. You know, people that digested the language, made it their own, and also became great conceptual artists and composers and all that along the way.
It's similar in writing or storytelling. You know, there are people just that have this knack. They're great storytellers, back porch storytellers. You know, my bubby just could weave a tale like nobody else.
It's a skill. It's a skill.
It's a skill. Didn't necessarily know the structure of story, but it was innate. It, you know, it can help down the line if you understand the theory of storytelling. But, you know, it's important to have that language and have that creativity. Just like you said, all those things working together are essential for jazz musicians. Hey man, your latest album is awesome, the live one, Capturing Spirits.
Yeah,
and I love, you know, that's mostly originals.
It's all originals except the last tune. Yeah.
Right. And what I love about your work, whether it's originals or covers, is that you still kind of keep intact this idea of the album as a concept. So like your breakout one, was it 9 Stories Wide? That was standards for the most part. And yet the vibe I got was still very much, okay, I can still tell a story about me, a very personal story about me through the curation of these tunes, you know? Was that go into your process for making that album?
Yeah. I mean, you know, I always say that like every player has certain natural, you know, curses and natural gifts, you know, and we need to kind of recognize those. You know, for me, you know, it won't be tooting my own horn because I have plenty of deficiencies and things I had to work on really hard. I might not tell you about them, but trust me, there's a lot. But I can say that, you know, going back, that's what I'm saying. Even no matter what kind of music I was playing, the storytelling and the creativity was something that came natural. Maybe my mom's a painter. Maybe it came something. My dad was a very creative kind of guy, very funny guy, you know, and maybe that side was I never had to think about, you know, so it's hard for me to speak about or teach it or whatever. Pretty much everything else I had to work really hard, and I'm constantly working hard, trying to be a better musician, a craftsman. You know, those are the things. Yeah. Some people, I've had students that are savants that can, you know, play back, you know, a chorus of my solo after they heard it, you know. So there's different skills, you know, you know, for those guys, sometimes the things that are easier for me are very difficult. In fact, the one I'm thinking about, he couldn't really even wrap his mind around it sometimes, you know. So yeah, it's hard when, you know, you just have to always look at your gifts and cultivate them while really working on the weaknesses, you know. And for me, lucky for me, and maybe possibly because of this, that's always been so important to me, you know. The internally, the idea, whether it's a line, a solo, a tune, an album, this is all important to me. Like telling a story, and it doesn't mean like once upon a time, you know, but it means a feeling, creating a little universe. You know what I mean? Yeah. That's part of what's hard for me of letting go of the CD concept and the album concept, because I really always loved that.
Right.
It's that bigger feeling, you know, people their feelings are getting much more small. Right. You know?
Playlist era, you throw a thing on shuffle. It doesn't matter what order the tunes are in. You can bounce from artist to artist. But yeah, you're right. You're robbing yourself of an experience of a curated album, or like your solo project one, you know, where
I thought so much about that on that album. More than
And what's beautiful is you give each song a unique identity. You know, it's almost to the extent almost that listening to each song sounds like a different guitar player on each one. I mean, it's really beautiful, man. It's really, really beautiful. And yeah, to kind of listen to one of those songs and bounce to another, again, kind of robs yourself of the experience to view this whole patchwork that was your sound on this album. So yeah, man.
Thanks, man. I agree.
We should mention you also have a book of transcriptions out right now, or a book on transcribing.
Yeah. It's called Offerings from Note, and it's transcriptions of a bunch of my music as well as solos of mine. And it was a painstaking process because we finished, the guy who kind of put it together finished it, and it hit me that as I was growing up, one of the things that was a little frustrating was there was no way to really know the fingerings, the way people played things, you know, and that was something I said, you know, I really want to offer that, you know, so if we're going to call the book Offerings of Note, you know, so I actually went through and I relearned all these solos, and basically like bar by bar or section by section, I filmed with my iPhone myself playing it the closest fingering I could imagine, which was probably pretty accurate because I could kind of figure out from where it was on the neck from the sound of the strings and everything. And basically so now it has all my exact fingerings for guitar players. I mean, all instruments will be interested in it. It has a couple small little rhythmic lessons. My music has some, you know, kind of Afro-Balkan concepts that I kind of, you know, put together that I need to be understood before you play a couple of the tunes, you know.
That's great, man. Because even me in my picking, you know, very mediocre picking of guitar. Yeah, the fingerings that some of these guys were using to achieve these lines always eluded me. And if you had tab, or if you just have, you know, the sheet,
tab was horrible.
The tab is horrible, always.
It was completely random.
Yeah. So very cool. Yeah, if you're a guitar player, if you're interested in jazz guitar, I urge you, go check out this book. It's really, really good. Again, the new album is Capturing Spirits, live disc. That's out right now. John, if people want to buy, I always encourage people right now, buy the physical. Now's the time to buy these physical CDs. If people want to just pick up these CDs, want to learn more about you, what's the best place to do that?
Yeah, I mean, you know, my stuff's everywhere as far as it's on Amazon, it's on iTunes, but it's like you said, it's always great to go direct for any of your favorite artists. Go direct to their website. My website, you can get all this stuff, and it's shipped very timely, and you know, it's an interesting time. You know, the streaming thing, we're really up against something very big and pretty dark, you know, when it comes to independent musicians. And I hope we can figure it out. You know, right now it's a little bleak, but I think we're gonna, not to get too into it, but basically we're gonna have to basically unionize at some point for bigger cuts to musicians and higher subscription prices, because it's just not sustainable. And the quality of music is going to go, you know, all the best players are not going to do albums anymore. They're just going to play live, and you're going to get the chumps making the albums, you know, which is already happening in the pop world. But
I know. But if you want that beautiful concept opening tune to closing tune album that, John, you do so well, maybe we should pay attention to that. Hey, man, we have time for, if you want to, one brief little, you know, tune at the end here, or a demo of a line or something like that.
Oh, sure.
Okay.
Yeah, well, I know you mentioned before that maybe telling some young musicians some things to work on.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I could say there's one thing I'm doing with a lot of my students, which is, you know, it's always been done on guitar, but I just feel like it's great to break it down, which is just to reduce the tune to the melody and the bass, you know, and learn them both, you know, pretty well. And it gives you a lot of a different concept, you know. So I'm going to play, here's a standard, right? And I'm going to start just with the melody and the bass, you know, and then see where it goes.
Yeah. Yeah. Beautiful, man. Gorgeous. Darn that dream, man.
I got carried away, so I got a little long.
No, it's beautiful, man. It's beautiful. And I see what you say of using those building blocks, you know, as steps toward this kind of exploration, creative exploration. So that's beautiful, man. John, this has been an absolute pleasure. Again, the new album, Capturing Spirits, out right now. Go buy it, people. It's really, really good. Or One, or 9 Stories Wide, or Shadowless, or any of your other great albums. Go check them out. And the new book, Offerings of Note, Transcriptions. This has been a pleasure. Thank you so much for joining us. I will catch you backstage while I go through some other stuff, including the 5 spot. Going to talk about 5 things I'm digging at the moment. But John, this has been great, man. Really appreciate it.
Thanks so much. Yeah, thanks.
So long, brother. All right. Thanks once again to Jonathan Kreisberg for stopping by, playing some tunes for us. And again, imparting such great wisdom for all of you aspiring guitar players out here. This is a cat you should be listening to. Before we move into the 5 spot, let me just let you know about Blue Sound. This is an award-winning wireless high-res sound system that lets you play music in any and every room throughout your home. You choose music from your favorite streaming service or music library connected to your home network. Control where, at what volume, and when the music plays via a free Blue OS app for your iPhone, tablet, desktop, or desktop computer. And that's it. Getting the kind of crisp, detailed sound that only an audiophile grade system can deliver has never been easier. That is how you live hi-fi. You can learn more about Blue Sound products at bluesound.com or by visiting our website, jazziz.com, where we have put together a Blue Sound Buyer's Guide. That Blue Sound Buyer's Guide also appears in our summer 2020 Fusion issue out right now. All right, time to get into the 5 spot, which again, 5 things I just happen to be digging at the moment. We're going to begin with some big news from our friend Jonathan Batiste, a brilliant keyboardist. You know John Batiste from his role on The Late Show with Stephen Colbert. He is the band leader. Anyway, an hour-long birthday concert that he recorded back in November 2019 when he turned 33 will get a premiere on Jazz Night in America's YouTube channel tomorrow, May 28th at 11 a.m. Eastern time. And if that's not cool enough to relive this awesome birthday celebration, John Batiste himself will join WBGO and Jazz Night host Christian McBride in the comments section for a special Q&A. And then to top it all off, John Batiste's radio episode on Jazz Night of America will air the following day, May 29th, across the country. You just tune into your local NPR station, check the local listings, and you'll be able to hear it. We have put together on our site a little guide to what's going on with John, including some links to our coverage of him in previous issues, including our winter 2018 print issue, some profiles we've done on him, as well as some playlists. So go check that out. Number 2, this is a cool one for fans of vocal jazz. It's a new album, Peggy Lee 100, centennial celebration honoring one of the 20th century's most important musical influences in the world of jazz and popular music. That, of course, being Peggy Lee of You Give Me Fever fame. The album, which you can see here, I pulled it up on screen, is part of a much larger celebration of Peggy Lee's 100th anniversary that will be celebrated throughout the year with music releases, notable exhibitions, which are going to be taking place online now, special events, programming, and a host of other tributes. This album, which was actually released yesterday on Peggy Lee's birthday, is a 22-track comprehensive set featuring her hits, 5 songs she co-wrote, as well as the previously unreleased version of Try a Little Tenderness. Yeah, it'll mark 57 years after it was originally recorded. It's just now making its debut. So this is a very cool project as well. That was number 2 in the 5 spot. Number 3 is the news that the Essentially Ellington competition will be taking place online. So Essentially Ellington is the premier competition for high school jazz programs. This is their 25th anniversary from June 8th to June 12th. Essentially Ellington events will be streamed on the Jazz at Lincoln Center's website, jazz.org, as well as their social media platforms. And there will be a public Zoom link that people can tune into. And this just recognizes high school programs and high school students in what has been called the Super Bowl of high school jazz competitions. Keeping the integrity of the Essentially Ellington program, these virtual events will include the traditional cheer tunnel, honoring each band, a virtual jam session in which students will play with members of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra, and a Q&A session with the managing and artistic director of Jazz at Lincoln Center, Wynton Marsalis. 18 bands will participate from around the U.S., and special this year, 5 international high school jazz programs have been selected to perform from all over the world. So that should be very cool. We'll have more info on that on our site as well. Number 4, this one is kind of it's the work of Reed Miles. It isn't a specific event per se, but hey, I told you, it's just stuff I'm digging at the moment. Reed Miles, the designer, I'm working on an album right now about album art. That's going to be part of our forthcoming fall 2020 issue. And you can't talk about album art without mentioning the great Reed Miles. He designed so many of the iconic album covers for Blue Note back in the 60s, and I've had such a blast just digging through his stuff. I mean, look at this little collage here. The graphic design, the typography, it's so emblematic of the Blue Note brand and of that era. And it's like you can almost hear the music before you play the album. That's what a great album cover does. And again, we'll be exploring this more in our Art of the Album issue, which is coming out in fall 2020. It's about everything related to albums, collecting albums, listening to albums, designing albums, producing albums. And again, if you subscribe now for that special 3-month trial, you'll be enrolled not only to receive the summer issue, but the following fall issue as well. Number 5, wrapping up the 5 spot, is an EP from one of my favorite musicians, Esperanza Spalding, and she is joining the pianist Fred Hirsch for the release of Live at the Village Vanguard, the Rough Mix EP. It's a 5-song EP being sold on Bandcamp through the end of June to raise funds for the Jazz Foundation of America's efforts to assist members of the jazz community impacted by this ongoing COVID-19 crisis. It was captured during the duo's 2018 run at the iconic New York City nightclub, the Village Vanguard. And it is a rough mix, just like the title says, with no edits. So as you hear it on these tracks, is exactly how it would have been in the club. The EP will be offered exclusively for download through Bandcamp and through the month of June for a minimum of $17, with additional donations encouraged on a pay-what-you-wish basis that, again, go to this amazing cause, the Jazz Foundation of America. Fred Hirsch, if you remember, was on the show a while back to play some tunes for us, and Esperanza Spalding, hopefully we're going to have on very soon to talk about this very project. Esperanza Spalding, if you remember, famously won the Grammy Award for Best New Artist in 2011, beating out Justin Bieber and upsetting a lot of Beliebers in the process. But anyway, this is a great album, and I encourage you to go buy it when it comes out in June. All right, that'll do it for the 5 spot and for today's episode. Quick programming note for stuff coming up. Starting next week, as I mentioned, June 1st, we are going to be moving into the 8:30 time slot. So that's the first thing I wanted to mention. Be sure to mark your calendars starting June 1st. We're pushing things into the night beginning at 8:30. But before we get there, we have a amazing remainder of the week program for you. Tomorrow, we are going to be talking with Gino Vanelli, that jazz rocker. And then Friday, we're going to be closing things out with Lawrence Hobgood, an amazing piano player, longtime associate of Kurt Elling. And then June 1, as we move into the 8:30 hour, we're going to be kicking things off with Esperanza Spalding. On June 2nd, we've got bassist Carlos Enriquez of the Jazz at Lincoln Center Orchestra. Wednesday, we'll be chatting with David Benoit, the piano player. Thursday, June 4th, Kim Waters. And Friday, June 5th, Naji. So you're going to want to tune in for those. It's going to be great. And again, mark your calendars starting June 1st. 8:30 time slot. Anyway, it's been an absolute pleasure talking with you. I am Brian Zimmerman. My kids are making noise in the background. That means I've got to get going. It's been a pleasure. So long, everyone. Take care.